Welcome to the Graybeard Chronicles podcast. Your hosts, Brian Halstead and Kevin Harkins, are two gray-bearded patriots who love God, their family and friends, and their country. The Graybeards are here to inspire, inform, and educate you on a myriad of topics they are passionate about. Brian and Kevin have a strong desire to share this with you to help you live your best life. Sit back and enjoy this amazing podcast as the Graybeards pass along the wisdom of the ages.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. I'm Brian Halstead.
And I'm Kevin Harkins.
And Kevin, we're here to pass along some wisdom of the ages. What the heck does that mean?
We're not perfect, but we do have gray beards. And that means we've got some significant life experience, some life lessons, and some perspectives that are worthy of passing along.
Well, I think that sums it up nicely. Let's get to it. And that's exactly what we're going to do, Kevin. We're going to skip our regular banter tonight because we have a special guest tonight, Mr. Dan Schilling. And for those that are watching this on video, you already know that. Audio listeners, now you do. But don't want to belabor introducing Dan and telling you a little bit about him before we get into a great conversation. So I had the great fortune of meeting Dan at a sales meeting a month or so ago, and was just very impressed by the information that he shared with us, and knew that he had to be a guest on the podcast and share this information with those of you out there. So Dan is a 30-year military veteran in the special operations community. Very interesting career there, and he can certainly share more with us here in a few minutes. But the thing that's really cool is how he's transitioned after that military career and become a New York Times best-selling author, and certainly interested to hear how that career progression works. So and I know that there's more stuff that we're going to tell folks about you, and I'm going to put a link to your bio and website and everything in the description of this video. But Dan, welcome, man. Thanks for being here. Thanks for agreeing to come on and talk with our folks and share this information about what you're doing with this book, The Power of Awareness, and everything else going on in your life.
Well, Brian, Kevin, I appreciate you guys having me on the show. I think it's a great platform. I think you guys share a lot of valuable information with people in a way that's easily absorbed. And I think that's really important in this era of a lot of hyperbole and polarization. I think this kind of a platform has more value to people because you can really get into things, and it's not about salacious details or, anything like that. It's things that might have value. So if I can contribute to that in any way, I'm happy to play a small part, just based on my own life experiences.
It's an honor to have you here, Dan, and I very much enjoyed learning about you, reading about you. What an amazing military career you had, but it's continuing into your post-military life. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about maintaining relevance throughout your life. One of the things in our society, and we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, not this specifically, but we as a culture, and maybe even worldwide, certainly in American culture, we tend to worship youth. And I'm not saying that's bad in all respects, but what I am saying is, as I have personally gotten older, I know that I have an incredible depth, a pool of knowledge and experience that I can draw from to help people live better lives. And that is exactly what you are doing. You have transitioned out of the military and taken that incredible pool of experience, and you're now using it to help people continue to get better. And so you remain relevant at, in my view, a time where there's never a greater depth of knowledge than you've ever had before. And it's remarkable. Thank you for sharing that with us.
No, I'm happy to. And I think you've touched on two things there. There's two subjects I think rolled up in that. One is the personal transformation as we transition out of careers or change careers or enter into retirement. And the other is what you do with that time. Those are separate efforts, and it's not, I didn't just happen to fall into writing, because I always say writing is a miserable way to make a living. Trust me, like it is just, it's a grind. My motto for my new profession, which is professional writer, is it's a guaranteed means of a low probability of income in as little as 4 years, because it's slow and no one gives you any money.
Oh my
and so
goodness.
you have to do it for another reason. But it goes back to, so to talk about that first topic first, Kevin, I think what happens with people in our lives and our careers, we tend to peak, or we tend to find our way into something that we have an affinity for or we're good at. And that becomes a very convenient place to latch onto. But when I make this hand gesture, which is you grab onto something to hold it in place, which is the antithesis of Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy, because that's where you start to struggle. Because if you lose that, well, who am I? And the reason people struggle when they make those kind of transitions, for the most part, is they're afraid of losing what they think is their identity. And all that really means is it's an ego, and you don't want to start from scratch. My approach to that was the opposite. I rushed into that, or I embraced it fully, as a better term, to say, all right, I want to do this other thing. In my case, it's writing. And writing's a meritocracy. I've got a great backstory. From a marketing standpoint, my publisher loves me. My agent can promote me to people. You know, everyone knows me because of Black Hawk Down, where I have the world record for most base jumps. You know, and I stood up secret units. And that's really easy to put together. But the real bottom line is, can I write a story or can I not? Yeah. That forces me to shed that perception of who I am, Special Ops Dan, and go, I got to start from scratch like every other writer. And that I felt was very appealing because it forced me to evolve. And I believe in evolving right up until the day we die.
Yeah, wow. Amen to that. Amen to that. You know, one thing that jumps out at me with what you just said, though, Dan, is yes, you are starting from scratch, but all those things that you've done, right? So those adrenaline-fueled activities like base jumping and holding that world record of the most in 24 hours, and everything that you've done in the special operations community, you know, those things all give you credibility to write a book about the power of awareness, right? So, you know, not just anybody could sit down and write that book and have it be credible information. So I think that yeah, you might be starting out as a writer, but you got a lot of history that gives you, you know, a huge amount of credibility.
Well, it gives me a lens, because I don't know that I agree with your statement. So Simon Sinek and Tony Robbins, for instance, are both powerful best-selling writers and authors and advisors of people and cheerleaders. Neither one of those guys have done a bloody thing in their lives. I don't mean to denigrate them. My point is, they're professional writers and cheerleaders. Tony Robbins doesn't create things. He helps other people get there. Simon Sinek makes observations about other people using science from somebody else, a third party yet again. And he captures that in a book in a very captivating way, and he promotes it out there, and he's got way better hair than I do. So people are going to pay him a lot of money to speak.
Right.
But he hasn't done anything. And I've read some of his books. I like some of the things he has to say. I think that's one of the things that, to your point, that I use is I've done a lot of different things in my life. And I'm attracted to doing things that force me to do something that's very hard or very scary for me. And scary can be defined as, I want to become a New York Times bestselling author. That's what I told my wife when I was getting ready to retire. And she's like, okay, can you just do that? I'm like, we'll see. Who knows? Maybe I won't make it. It's really intimidating for me. I'm intimidated by being a writer. I struggled for the first few years with telling people that I was a writer. And another writer who's a friend of mine, kind of a mentor, who's had like 18 New York Times bestsellers, basically looked at me and said, shut up, you're a writer, just keep going. Don't be afraid to tell people that's what you are. So, you know, that's my way of trying to make, back to what Kevin brought up earlier, that's my way of trying to embrace the change that was coming for me. We all retire at some point. We all change careers at some point, or we get fired, or our company folds, whatever. What do you do next? If you fear it, it's harder because you're holding on to this thing and you're being dragged into the future in a way you didn't want to have happen. My advice is let go of that. It's already happened. Dive in and then make what happens happen the best you can.
There's so many directions my mind is going. You'd say something and I'm like, I got to tell this and I got to tell that. But actually, what you were just speaking about with respect to being a writer, love him or hate him, I actually happen to love him, mostly because my daughter loves him. Anthony Bourdain, God rest his soul. You know, you said, Dan, that you had some incredible accomplishments before you started writing. And Anthony Bourdain, I was watching an interview with him at one point, and he is known today as a writer, but he wasn't. I mean, this man grew up from the bottom rung in a kitchen all the way through being the executive chef at one of the most popular restaurants in New York City, and then started writing. So he had this depth of knowledge to pull from. And when he wrote the book that put him on the map, Kitchen Confidential, which is an incredible book about that industry, all of a sudden his publisher said to him, "You are a writer. That's what you need to look at yourself as at this stage in your life. That's what you're doing. And you're taking this message, this story, this wisdom, and you're putting it out there so that people can understand what's going on here and make decisions based on what they learned from it." It's really a great story.
But he didn't have to, and I agree with you. And I watched a really brilliant documentary and tragic documentary about Anthony Bourdain.
Yes.
And I had never seen his show. I don't watch a lot of shows.
Right.
I like to read books because I'm kind of just a geek. And I just like to hang out in the quiet.
Right.
And, you know, it started with a magazine article that he wrote that got published in the New Yorker. That's how a publisher came to him. But he struggled with his identity.
Yes, he did.
And the demons that surrounded his heroin and everything else. He had a very wonderful wife and a daughter, and he detonated that. He detonated that because he was still lost. And I think even the relationship that proved to be the catalyst for his suicide, he didn't know how to find that as a foundation of who he was then. And that happens, man. Suicide is a big problem for a lot of communities. It's one of the things I do now is I get flown around the country talking about resilience, which is how Bryant and I met. They flew me down to talk to a whole bunch of police officers and help them with some processing of, hey, I've been shot. What does that mean to me? And having been shot myself, well, they flew me down there to do that. And, you know, resilience is this wonderful means by which we can explore who we are, even by addressing the fragility or the things that are causing us concern or our life has detonated around. And it goes back to the same philosophy. Well, something bad has happened to me. I can no longer fear it. It already happened. Rather than try and keep it locked in my head, if I go out and embrace it and I make myself vulnerable, there's so much power in sharing information with other people to solve a problem that's bothering me. What scares us, especially if you're a guy, and especially if you're a guy with gray hair, is making yourself vulnerable. You don't want to do it.
Right.
You don't.
Yeah. So that I'd have to ask you a question though. Do you find, because I do to a degree, because I think there's still some reluctance there to make yourself vulnerable, and at the same time, I do feel like it's easier for me now than it once was.
It happens because age and wisdom, if you get wiser, age doesn't necessarily equal wisdom.
Amen. We have said that a bunch of times.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
People don't evolve. But with wisdom comes the realization that making yourself vulnerable and sharing information about yourself does two things. It allows you to advance and solve this problem that helps you. And if you're vulnerable first, I've learned this a lot because I talk about my own challenges with suicide, potential suicide. It's by no means a guarantee that I'd be sitting here with you guys today. Trust me. And when you do that, you really help that other person to make themselves vulnerable, not just for vulnerability's sake, but so they can overcome something and they can share something and they can get something off their mind. Man, that's really powerful. And that's why, you know, the first couple of books I wrote, and including Alone at Dawn, which put me on the map and validated me as a New York Times bestseller, were important to me because of where I came from. But that book behind you guys, The Power of Awareness, is very important to me and powerful to me because it allows me to help others be safe. And that's why the book I'm writing now and flying around the country talking about resilience, that's even more important to me because that's the next natural progression for me. Okay, be safe first. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Don't get robbed, raped, or murdered. Okay, I'm safe. I got a house. I can eat food. I've got an income. Whatever your Maslow triangle looks like. Now, the question is, how do I be the most resilient person, which is synonymous with being anti-fragile? And how do I find my purpose and how do I pursue happiness? And the book I'm writing now is on resilience and the pursuit of happiness, which to me is the ultimate goal of being a human, is to be happy. And I don't mean happy because you got a fireplace and you're smoking your Peterson pipe and you guys are both quaffing bourbon. I'm talking about things that you have satisfaction with, that you use to help others and make the world a better place, and that's worthy of your best efforts, and that you also enjoy. That's the definition of happiness for me. I didn't make that up. That comes from Aristotle. That's Aristotelian happiness. That's what I want to write about now. Because you know what? Man, I spent 30 years doing stuff where conflict and armed conflict itself all were part of what you did. And killing people, man, to me, that's a net negative experience. It does nothing to advance you as a human. It diminishes you, in fact, I believe. Some guys get off on it. They're like, I haven't killed enough bad guys. That's a bottomless pit, man. And so for me, I'm trying to make peace with the demons that bother me about the fact that I've had to kill a bunch of people. I don't even know how many people I've killed. I'm not being blasé. I'm saying is I don't know. And that was part of what my own challenges were. So now that I get to help other folks with be safe, be resilient, find your purpose in life and be happy, man, that's my reinvention. And back to what Kevin started with, I think what my advice to people who may be listening is, what is it that you want to do next? Man, it could be a charity. You could be a volunteer at a homeless shelter, or I volunteer, instruct at an adaptive sports program. You can define yourself by so many other ways, but you have to just think about it and spend time in that. Anyway, I digress and I ramble, which I've been known to do.
No, valuable information, man. And I'm happy to sit here and listen. That's what this is about, right? And you know, the way that you've transitioned, and I want to go back a little bit and talk about your military career, because you know, hearing some of the stories that I've heard you share, really, you know, people oftentimes will have these mental preconceptions about, you know, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to, you know, graduate from high school, go to college, or go into the military, and, you know, then do this and this.
Which is all bullshit, by the way. That's a social expectation.
Exactly. It's a social norm. Yeah. So, and your career path, right, is kind of like, it's kind of the alter ego of that. So, you know, I love to hear the story about how you know, you started here and transitioned over here and then went over here. So if you would take a minute and share that information, where you started and where you ended up.
Well, I'll preface it with saying I changed military services the way most people change cars. About every few years, I would leave one service and join another. And that sounds odd, and maybe it sounds counter intuitive or even counter, you know, beneficial. But I joined the Army because the girl I was dating at the time reached into my chest, grabbed my beating heart, ripped it out, crushed it, and I was destroyed. And I met this Army recruiter on a lark who said, we will pay you to jump out of airplanes. And it had never occurred to me, believe it or not, to jump out of an airplane to that point in my life. I mean, now, you know, parachutes are my thing, you know, skydiving, halo, base jumping, whatever, speed flying, those are my things. Anyway, I said, I'm in. I'm just going to try this out. So I joined as an infantry grunt. I was a paratrooper, and I did that for a few years, and I really enjoyed it. Like humping a ruck in a 60 was cool. I found an outlet for my energy, and it was a meritocracy. The harder I worked, the better I was at it, the more things I could do. And then I ended up getting into Air Force combat control, which is the Air Force's version of a ground special ops guy. And that's a long story. I'll show you with that. But I met these guys who were combat controllers on a training trip. And here's the brevity story. they told me, hey, we're Halo, we're Scuba, and we get pro pay. And I remember this conversation as clear today as it happened 38 years ago. I'm like, pro pay, what's that? And this guy, Pete Neal, said, that's cool guy pay. And I said, I'm in. I want cool guy pay. So I ended up getting out of the Army, which is a long, funny story all by itself, in the middle of my Army contract, and transferred and did an inter-service transfer to the Air Force. And I spent, 10 years doing that. And that's where Black Hawk Down and a lot of other things that people associate with me, I had those experiences. And in that time, I got to work with the best in the world. I was integrated with SEAL Team 6 one day, Delta Force the next, working with the Aussie SAS. I mean, in Air Force Special Ops, in this particular unit at the Joint Special Operations Command, I got to work with the best in the world. More than the rest of those people got to work with each other. And so I learned from the best in the world. And then, combat experiences and all that, I decided to get out. And I was out of the military completely. I did a bachelor's degree, did a master's degree, and then I ended up in the Army SF Guard and Army Special Forces. So now I'm back in the Army as an enlisted dude, and I really enjoyed that. And they convinced me I should have a commission because I had like 3 college degrees, and I wasn't really interested in getting a commission. And one of my SF warrant officers came to me one day and said, fill out this paperwork, and when W-4 tells you to do that, you fill it out. And the next thing you know, they called me up and said, hey man, we got you a direct commission to lieutenant. You're now an officer. Come in, we got to swear you in and cut up your ID card. And that threw me for a loop. But the bottom line is I left the Army SF and then came back into Air Force Special Tactics. And then I got to create 2 squadrons there. One was a white special ops unit, and the other one I created was a special mission unit that I can't say anything about because it's completely classified. And that's my whole career. So I went Army, Air Force, and I may be the only guy in history to have been enlisted and commissioned in the Army and enlisted and commissioned in the Air Force. So it's not a career path. It was more like a Rorschach blot that you just sort of threw up on a wall.
Right.
But that's my approach to life, man. And it is, as odd as it may seem, and as I got beat up by a lot of other people about why are you getting out or why are you doing this? And all I could ever say was, I feel like it's the right thing for me to do. And I encourage people, if you're listening, if you've got something that's a passion for yours, whether it's work or it's just, I want to write books or write a poem or write a screenplay or write a rock and roll or country song, just sit down and try it out. The best thing you can do in life is to just try something different that scares you.
Huge value in that, and thank you for sharing that.
I have 2 things I want to ask you to comment on, moving away a little bit from the tactics of life into more just sort of head work. The first is spirituality, and the second is external forces controlling your life. So I understand that you are, I believe, a Buddhist.
Yeah, I am.
Oh, you are. Okay, good. I got that right. And so when I hear that and I watch you talk and I have learned about you and I watch you on some other videos, I would characterize you as a deeply spiritual or I'm not sure of the right word, but they're person. The one where this belief system that you have in your head affects how you behave and what you do. So
yeah,
that's
true.
Okay, that's point number. Point number 2 is, and Brian and I talk about this on many different podcasts, is so many of us, especially when you're younger, and I think you have the opportunity to get away from this when you get older, and most people don't. And that is, they allow all of this shit going on out there in the world to really dictate what they want to do with their lives. They are controlled by external forces. They are controlled by people and their opinions. They are controlled by circumstance. They are controlled by all of these other things instead of being who they are, living the life. And this what reminded me when you said, this is what I thought was good for me. I went, I had this really, you're right. I don't think everybody in the history of the United States did what you did. And so.
And it's hard. It's not some big accomplishment. It's just a weird byproduct of my approach to life.
Right. So if you would talk about sort of what your spirituality means to you, and then this idea of how that affects these external forces that are at play in everybody's life, and how that affects your decision-making processes and what you do for, as you go forward.
Those are So I appreciate both of those topics, Kevin, because they're central to who I am and what I feel is can be best about us as humans. And I don't care if you're a right winger in Wyoming, a left winger in Brooklyn, or a socialist in Amsterdam. I do not care. Politics mean nothing to me. I will share with you guys, I consume no news, zero.
Okay.
I read The Economist every week when it comes because it gives me deeper information about topics that have more relevance or permanence to them. And I do not do any 24-hour news cycle, 100% zero.
Okay.
Now, this goes back to, and this isn't why I do that, but it helps me with my spirituality. I became a Buddhist because Buddhism saved my life. That's not hyperbole.
Wow.
There's a book. I've got it. I don't know if I grab it. There it is. This book saved my life. If I can get it out.
Wow, this is big stuff.
There it is right there. This book is called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. And you can see it's dog-eared. It's got all these boarding passes and stickies and all kinds of crap in it. Because when I was really struggling with who I was, what I had done, what I would do about those things, I read that book. And one of the reasons that the book behind you is called The Power of Awareness is an homage to the power of now.
Okay.
Now, it's the right title for the book. It fit. But Eckhart Tolle's book saved my life. And it connected me with my own understanding of who I am, where I am, what's happening with me now, and the value of letting the past go and not focusing on the future too much. You have to allow for those things. I am this person, these things happened. I want to go do these things in the future. But really, you live every day in the moment. You guys are enjoying a pipe and a bourbon. I'm hanging out in my office. We're having a great conversation. That's reality. Those other things no longer matter.
Right.
And I was working in Thailand for several years, and I would hang out in Buddhist temples there that are Theravada Buddhism, which is the prominent variety in Thailand. And man, I'll spare you what happened with me, but I had an epiphany one day, and I really broke through. And it was while I was reading this book. And that's why I became a Buddhist, because it's really about understanding things. And Buddhism allows for, there's no God in Buddhism. It allows, you can be a Christian and a Buddhist as well. You don't have to subscribe to it. It's not actually a religion, it's a perspective. And that changed a lot of things for me. And that's one of the reasons why I didn't kill myself. And so for me, I became a Buddhist because letting go of things is really, we were talking about this early on, is central to Buddhism. Attachment to something you already have means I don't want to let it go. And attachment to something I want means I have to have this thing, and it's way out here in the future, and how I must have this thing. Your struggle with those things, if you just allow them to happen or not happen, it's easier. And that helped me to process, the world. And it really leads into, central to that is the ego. Buddhism is about not defeating your ego, but allowing it to dissipate and just sort of go away and not pay attention to it. And that's what this book was about. And that's also my philosophy. That's a segue into your second question, which is external forces upon us. Bryant was talking about, the expectations of life. Go to school. It's a song by the Godfathers, birth, school, work, death. That's the name of the song. And it encapsulates what he was taught. It's a great 80s, like first wave kind of song. But, that's how people look at their life. And you don't have to do that. And so social expectations to get married, to be a certain way, to hey, sexual orientation. You're a guy, you should raise a family, you should be straight. And you see these guys who were gay their whole life, but they got married and had kids. They were really being true to themselves. There's SEALs who have done that, and then they changed gender, whatever. None of that stuff, all the things that caused them to do that were all about their ego and meeting social expectations. And I don't agree with social expectations. I don't agree with them at all.
Okay.
I think no one has a right, and that's what this country is founded upon, to tell you how you should be or live your life. That's why we need to have more dialogue between Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, CNN, Fox News, I don't care how you define it. The fact that they won't allow each other to talk and you won't listen to somebody else or let them have an opinion different from yours is anti-American, in my opinion. This country
Yes, indeed.
was founded uniquely on this one. It goes back to Aristotle. The pursuit of happiness is written into the Declaration of Independence for a reason. And it goes back through Francis Bacon and John Locke all the way to Aristotle. And the people who wrote that document, I don't like the term founding fathers because it's not who this country is now, but it's the people who founded this. They believed in that so much. And you know what is not allowing people to pursue their happiness is telling them they can't have an opinion that's different than yours.
Right.
That's the American way, regardless of politics, regardless of social stature, regardless of, demographics. Anyway, sorry, I rambled.
No, that's why you're here.
This is great stuff.
No, that's great information, man.
So don't let people tell you what you should do.
Right.
Do what you want.
I am on board with that. So let's talk more about the book and why you wrote this and your mission to save lives of people by sharing that information with them. And who's your target audience?
My target audience is 13-year-old girls to 70-year-old senior executives. And the reason that is I'm non-denominational in every sense of the word. I want people to be safe. I want them to travel the world with well-founded confidence. And after I wrote Alone at Dawn, my agent was hounding me to write that book that we're talking about, The Power of Awareness. He said, listen, you have great stories, you're a good storyteller, and you have an interesting life story with experiences, counterterrorism and riots in Bangkok and all the stuff that I've done. He said, I think you should write this book about personal safety. And I wasn't interested in writing that book. I want to write other books. I want to write novels, and I keep getting these homework assignments from my agent. Write this book. I'm like, God damn it, I don't want to write that book. And it turns out to be really good that I do what he says, because Alone at Dawn was a homework assignment for me. He said, I think you should write this. I told him about it. He said, you should write that book. And he came to me and said, write this book. And I said, no. Fast forward a couple of years, I go to Baja, California. I'm going to race in the Baja 1000 with a buddy of mine. And we watched our race truck, chase truck, all of our race gear, everything gets stolen in 90 seconds by Mexican car thief dirtbags while we watched from 600 yards away. If I had a 300 Win Mag, I could have solved that problem. But I didn't. They stole the truck. I shouldn't have let it happen. I knew better. So after the long walk across the border without passports and the great people at the U.S. Customs letting us back into America, I called my agent and said, okay, I'll write that book. So that was the genesis behind it. But then the synthesis of what I want to do with this book. And if you're listening, whoever you are, I hope you pick this book up, because whether you're a special operations expert, police detective, or 13-year-old high school teenager, I think it has value to you. My approach was this. I didn't want the book to be about me. I don't like talking about myself that much. I do it professionally, but I don't like it. And I thought, what can I do to help people understand and be best prepared to not get robbed, raped, or murdered? And I drew from the best people from the communities that I worked with. So I drew from CIA case officers I'd worked with, because I spent a lot of time working with CIA, people from my special operations community. And then I reached out to law enforcement detectives, because they always deal with the aftermath of crime. And that's a really great source to talk to about people. So I thought I would take what I could from those people, their wisdom, to use the gray beard metaphor here, and put that into what I thought would be an easier approach. And my whole approach to this book is there are 6 rules that follow in a logical order that you can understand if you're 13 or 83, that will make you safer everywhere in the world. And you know what they're not about? They're not about martial arts and guns. I do not believe in carrying a gun as a first line of defense. You know why? If that gun is your whoopee, your little warm blanket of comfort, you can't take it to Brooklyn, Bali, or Bangkok, man. So what are you going to do without that gun if that's your thing? My book's about have situational awareness and learn what that means, and then practice it. So that's why I have exercises. And then trust and listen to your intuition. Your intuition is 1,000,000 years of successful evolution that is speaking to you. Because if you're standing here and listening to this podcast, congratulations on your superior ancestry. Every ancestor you ever had lived long enough to have sex and then create every other ancestor that you have.
That's right.
And that's biological success.
Right.
So listen to that voice, because we get in trouble when we override our intuition. It's not that it doesn't speak to us. It's that you go, it's going to be okay. Or I don't want to be rude, or I don't want to be viewed as silly. Terrible reasons to risk your life, because your intuition is telling you not to do that. So that's the foundation of my book. And then really it's just 4 more rules, which are: ask yourself this question: do I have a problem? The answer to that question will tell you, because you need to ask it, especially if you're a non-professional. Do I have a problem here? Is that guy going to try and steal the money I just took out of the ATM? Is this person going to try and follow me out of the bar with my girlfriend? If the answer is yes, you have to make a plan. And that's the 4th rule. And I talk about how to do that. And then finally, you have to act, and you have to act decisively. That's the 5th rule. And in the aftermath of a close call or something bad, or even if you get away clean, you need to regroup and recover and think about what just happened so you can learn from your own lessons. Because the essence of my book is you're your only personal safety expert. Nobody can be a personal safety expert for you. Who is? The cops, the airport authorities, the city people, the public transportation folks? They have responsibilities, but they are not responsible for your personal safety 24/7. You have to become your own expert. And I thought, don't use technical jargon, don't use acronyms and try and promote like I'm the world's greatest safety expert, do all these things that I say. It's about, think about it this way, and you can go out and travel the world, because the world's a wondrous place. And I want you to go out and experience it.
Yeah,
that's my book.
It's a great book, by the way, and I would encourage everybody that's listening or watching to definitely get a copy of it, whether it's a hard copy or a download or the audio book, whatever. Make sure you consume what's in this book. Good stuff.
So Brian, I would add to that, if you're listening to this, all folks are watching, I'm in the process of converting the Power of Awareness into an app, so that people anywhere in the world, because this is where everyone gets their information now, is on their phone, can pull up these same principles, take this course, go through the practical exercises, review the information, and get smarter, all from the ease of your cell phone. And that's because I realize most people will not read a book. I wish that they would. I think books are better, but I want everyone to be safe. So if I founded an institute with 2 other world-class personal safety and education experts, and if you go to the Power of Awareness Institute.org or mypoa.org, crap, it's my own website. You'd think I'd know what it is. Anyway, the Power of Awareness Institute, you can Google it. You'll probably find it. If it's people with spirituality, you got the wrong one. There's another one out there. If you find my name or go to my website or Google me, you'll find your way. And I hope people can either pick up the book or the app will be available here later this spring. And I'm really excited about that. My mission in life right now is to save lives. It's my only real purpose. Everything else is secondary.
Amen.
That's awesome.
You know, all the stuff you were just talking about, I'm sure, I'm just guessing this, but one of my favorite books is The Alchemist. And you remind me, you were all the business, especially about the early stages of awareness. It's, paying attention to the omens, and that's what The Alchemist is all about. And so anyway, great book, and
so many great books out there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get the distillation of Buddhism, I recommend a book called What the Buddha Taught by Walpola Ruhala. But if you and it's really this really easy to digest little book about, hey, this is what Buddhism is about. And the great thing about Buddhism is it allows for all other religions. It doesn't, because it's not one, first of all, and it's not in competition with anybody. And you can be a Muslim and be a Buddhist. Truly, you can.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the cool things about it. I'm a big believer in the universe as being much bigger than what we can even believe that it is. I think we don't know what we don't know about the universe, really.
Amen.
Yeah, no doubt.
Amen.
Hey Dan, there was something else that you shared when you spoke, and I heard you, doing the first time that I met you, and I don't know that I'll get this exactly right, but it was something to do with love being the most underappreciated word in our society, or something to that effect, and that really kind of hit home with me, right? Because I've said many times on this podcast that that's the lesson. That's the master lesson we're here to learn is love. Can you talk more about that?
I can, because in fact, and it's not, and I agree with you 100%, Brian. Love is the essence of humanity. I think the purpose is to be happy. But if I said to you guys, I want you to think of the thing that makes you feel most resilient, and I want you to think of the thing that makes you happiest in your life. You two real humans that I'm talking to. You know what's going to be at the center of those two things? Love is going to be at the center of both of them. It doesn't matter what you pick. The job, because some people, their family is not a source of love or happiness for them, or a source of healing for them. They got a shitty family. It happens. It's humanity.
Right.
But you find something that has value to people that they enjoy, love's going to be at the center of it. Love and reciprocity are the two key transactional experiences of life. Reciprocity, because if I give you something as a human, because we're social people, you're going to feel obligated to give me something back. That's why they give things away for free at car dealerships and shit like that. So that's a very powerful part of being a human. But the other and key and most satisfying and truly worthy thing in our lives is the people that we love. So, people hire me and fly me around the country to talk about stuff because I'm Mr. Special Ops guy, Black Hawk Down, base jumping dude. And when I get up and talk about love and reciprocity and vulnerability, sometimes people are like, I'm not sure I think this guy might be an imposter.
Right.
But I feel that's what's valuable in life. And hey, you can go out and hunt people down that are bad guys and kill them and make a living from it. I did. Or be a world-class Red Bull athlete, like Tim Swanson, or who we were talking about before.
John DeVore.
John DeVore.
Yeah, John DeVore. Like, you can be that person. But at the end of the day, man, you know what? That's part of your love. And, when I wrote about John Chapman in Alone at Dawn, it's for those of you not aware, it's a book about a special operations hero of mine who I knew, who got the Medal of Honor in the Air Force. It's the only Medal of Honor in the Air Force in half a century. And you know what? When he died on a mountain trying to save 23 other people, that's a gesture of love. It's nearly as powerful as the love a mother has for their child. Nearly. Yeah. I think that's the most powerful connection of love. But his sacrificing of himself for people he didn't even know, that's a testament to love. Love takes many forms. Yeah. And I think that's the essence of human life, but I think that our purpose is to find happiness. I just maintain that love is a part of that happiness.
Yeah. Oh, amen to that. And I it's interesting that you say that about, being there and presenting, and you say that and people think, oh, this guy's an imposter. This is not who,
Well, they don't expect
because,
it. They don't expect
understand.
it to come out of my mouth.
But that's, for me, it was the opposite, right? So I expected you to talk about the other things that you talked about. And when you said that, that was my hook. Personally, when you said that, I said, that was my mental hook, that I got to go talk to this guy. I got to invite him on the podcast. I want him to share more information with the people that listen to our podcast, because that's powerful.
But it's not powerful because it's coming from me, I don't think. I think it's powerful because it's universal.
Well, and it's powerful because people don't say it enough. And
especially for my community, we've got this perception, like, and I went through that transition myself, man. I used to think I was an action guy, and I was an action guy. And that's what I did. I did action guy stuff. I combat scuba diver, I blow stuff up, I throw motorcycles out of airplanes. That's cool stuff. And it's fun. You know what? It's a really good time. And when it's really good, it's the best. Because I was doing things that a fraction of a percent of humanity could do. And I'm very proud of that. But you know what? At the end of the day, those are still just things. It's no different than being a musician or a full-time writer or a teacher or a nurse, something that has value to society. All of those things have their own little quirks about them, and they're all just as valid a way to do things. I think those other professions, all the others besides the one I listed about myself, are better for humanity. That's all.
Yeah. I'm going to make this is totally off topic, but I'm going to make an observation here. Something that I've enjoyed about this conversation, I know many special operations people that have done that in their military career in the past. And most of them describe themselves, and they don't mean it seriously, but they actually use, I'm just a knuckle dragon, tactician that's trained to kill people kind of conversation. And the thing that I've enjoyed about Dan is he is that, but he's also, he's very cerebral. And I love that. I mean, you're well read. You can come at issues from a number of different directions. There's spirituality, there's love. I mean, this is not a language that is often spoken when you're talking about the kinds of lives that people live when they're in that world. And so I appreciate that. I just want to share that.
Well, something though, Kevin, what's interesting is it's in my book, Alone at Dawn. It's a big differentiator between Air Force combat controllers and say SEALs or Green Berets or Rangers. And part of the reason that happens is I think I'm a middle of the pack guy. People think I'm exceptional, and I'm not saying I haven't done the things that I have done.
Right.
But to me personally, I'm a middle of the pack guy. But how do I define my pack? My pack is A-list combat controllers who worked in Black Ops, and that's a small pool of people. But what they all share is the virtue of being the lone Air Force guy attached to a SEAL platoon, a Ranger platoon, a Special Forces ODA, an SASR troop from Australia, the GSG-9 from Germany, the Kriegsmarines in Norway. You know what you have to do to be a guy who can do all of those communities? You have to subordinate your ego. You learn that you have to be socially adaptable, malleable, and very rapidly orienting, or they're going to crush you.
Fascinating.
So you can't be the slowest guy or the worst shot, because then it's like, well, the Air Force guy.
Yeah.
You can't be the best guy either, even though a lot of times our guys are, because you know what happens? If you displace the alpha at that group, you're putting a crosshair on your back as well. So you really want to sit in the top third. And so when I would shoot at Delta Force way back in the day, I shot in the top third amongst those guys. I could shoot as well as those guys. And because I learned with them, and I learned with, expert other trainers, whatever all that stuff may be. But here's what happens. By virtue of having my responsibility, I'm the lone guy there. Every bomb that gets dropped on their behalf, it's 100% on my shoulders. Now, if I kill Uday and Qusay Hussein, Saddam Hussein's kids, and I'm Delta Force, well, Delta Force didn't kill those guys. A guy named Mike, who's a friend of mine, killed those guys. But Delta Force goes, well, we killed them. Delta Force killed Saddam Hussein's kids. It's not in their interest to say the Air Force guy did it. But what happens is we all win as a team. You know what happened if you dropped those bombs short and it killed some Americans? Air Force guy did it.
Oh, exactly.
So you carry this responsibility, and it forces you to think more and differently than everybody else in the battlefield. And I'll give you one more example, and I don't want to bog down on this too much, but we experience combat differently than everyone else. I've learned that in the course of writing the book. I just thought the way I experienced combat was like everyone else, but it's not. So if you're a Green Beret, Kevin, and Bryant's a SEAL, and I'm a combat controller, and all three of us are in a gunfight, you two see a gunfight the same way, and it's like this. You see the world in a gunfight in two dimensions. You think left and right and near and far, and all you're doing is making a kinetic connection, point to point, from you to that bad guy, and how to shoot that bad guy in two dimensions. You could say there's a third dimension, but really it's two. It's all surface, things on the surface, and you're paying attention to what they are. And you're engaging targets, and you're killing bad guys. I don't think that way in a battlefield. When I'm in a gunfight, I am always thinking in four dimensions, because I think near, far, left, right. I'm also thinking high and low, because airspace is how I live and die, and how everyone else around me lives and dies. And time is an important factor for me. So when you're in a gunfight as a SEAL, the gunfight just takes as long as it takes. It's just kind of like, hey, I'm in the moment, and I'm doing this thing, and then it's over because we killed the bad guys, or we rolled onto the objective, or we withdrew, whatever the case may be. But for me, I don't have that luxury. And so everything you're talking about, for me as a combat controller, I think the reason I'm successful at the other things I do, it forced me at a young age and at a very low rank to be a very far-reaching thinker about the things that I was doing. I had to know the battle plan. I had to know what the commander wanted, but I still had to be as tactically proficient as the other knuckle draggers I was with.
Right.
And it makes these guys who do what I do really well are exceptional people. And I don't put myself, I'm a middle of the pack guy. I'm not trying to say I'm something big or special.
Right.
I don't think I am.
Right.
But those guys really are. And they work among some other really special guys from, say, Delta Force or SEAL Team 6. But a lot of those guys in those units are really just tacticians, to your point.
Right.
They breach, they shoot. They breach,
Right.
they shoot. They breach, they shoot, and they mission plan. That's all they do.
Right.
I'm not denigrating them. They're the best in the world.
Right. Right.
But that combat controller has to keep pace with them and do all these other things. And it's, to me, I'm really honored to have been one of those guys and to write the definitive book about who they are. That was really important to me.
Yeah, and that's a nice segue into that conversation, because I wanted to ask you about that, because I've heard you say that in addition to, one of the reasons you wrote the book and are helping with this movie and so on, is to help educate the American public and the world about who combat controllers are, because a lot of people don't have any idea who they are or what they do. And I think you used the reference of the movie Navy SEALs from back in the 90s, and that really kind of put them on the map. And
It didn't kind of.
Yeah.
That movie put the SEAL community on the map.
Yeah.
Charlie Sheen and Michael Bain, this crappy little B movie, and the God gun and all this other stuff that happens in the movie. And it's a great movie. It's a fun movie to watch. It's an action guy movie. Before that movie came out in 1990, there was kind of SEALs, and there was Dick Marcinko and the deadly guy in the Delta, and people kind of knew about him. And a movie came out, which wasn't even a real movie. It's fictitious. And suddenly they're on the map, and they have never looked back as a community. The SEALs have ridden that perception of who they are, for better or worse, for 33 years. And I think it came out in 89. And that's okay. And it's worked for them. Pluses and minuses. And this is our opportunity to do that. For me to say, listen, the deadliest guy to ever walk a battlefield in the history of human warfare is a combat controller. That guy can kill more people than anybody else on the battlefield, using all the skills that everybody else does, but this other skill that he does better than anyone else. And I make the point, and I talk about this when I speak. Calvin Markham was a combat controller, the first combat controller to roll in with 595, this ODA, Special Forces ODA, in Afghanistan, in America's response to 9/11. In his first 26 days of combat, first combat he'd ever been in his life, he killed more people than any SEAL in the history of SEALs. And it was just his first deployment. And he had 11 deployments, or maybe 13, I can't remember. A shit ton of deployments.
Yeah.
He killed 3,500 people himself in 26 days.
Yeah, as I learned about you, I made the determination. You can't go back and redo it, but I would have loved to have been a combat controller. I didn't even know it existed, and so
nobody does. The downside is you still don't get the credit, and
right.
and that's
of course,
just,
right. You have
we accept that as a byproduct of who we are.
Right. Right.
And people, even younger guys like in an ODA or a SEAL platoon, they'll be like, oh, the Air Force guy, this or that. Guys who've been around a lot or have had their lives saved by a combat controller when no one else was going to be able to save them. No, we're a great guy to have on your team. I'm not here to be a SEAL.
Right.
I'm here to be a combat controller.
Well, I certainly look forwed to seeing the movie.
Yeah.
And is there a working title? Is there an official title? Can you say?
The working title is Combat Control, and we should be filming this time. We should be in principal cinematography this time next year. And I'm really excited about it because I like Jake Gyllenhaal. I think he's a really great actor. I like the director. He's Sam Hargrave. He directed Extraction with Chris Hemsworth. That's sort of his claim to fame. And I think they're a really winning combination. And I really like Sam. I haven't really spent a lot of time with him, but we've talked. And
Right.
I've never met Jake Gyllenhaal because he's a movie star, and I'm just a dude who lives on the mountain who writes books.
Yeah, and he's playing the part of John Chapman, right?
He is John Chapman, and I'm really excited about that. And I think what's cool about this movie is it's not a war movie. It's a love story. And I would say that because of how I look at the world, but it's a love story between John and his family and a love story between John and the guys he's on the mountain with. And it's written that way. The screenwriter who's a good friend of mine, is this amazing screenwriter. He wrote this powerful, moving story, and I won't tell you all about it, but it's not like a war movie. It's only got this action, all the stuff that happened to John happens in the screenplay, but it's just this really powerfully, personally compelling story about being a human and these kind of circumstances, and that appeals to me and my Buddhist nature, maybe. I don't know.
Nice.
Didn't I read somewhere though that your favorite movie is The Guardian? Isn't that where you really love that movie? No.
No, definitely. You know what my favorite movie is?
What? The Guardian.
My favorite movie is called The Red Turtle. It has no words in it. You should check it out.
Okay.
The Guardian. We just about can't get through an episode without Kevin getting a Coast Guard dig in somewhere.
That's the Coast Guard's version of the B movie, although it has Kevin Costner and Ashton Kutcher, however you say his name, as there. It's an awesome movie.
It is a good movie.
You got it. All right.
I believe you. Yeah, Kevin Costner, he's a good actor. But actors, I love him. I have a man crush on Lawrence Fishburne. I got to hang out with him on set on a movie I was helping out with, and he's just the loveliest human, man. And he's just this cool guy. He's a cigar smoker, so we hit it off. We were talking about racism and movies and cigars, and he's just a badass dude. And he's Mr. Clean from Apocalypse Now. To me, I'm like, he's like, well, call me Larry. I'm like, I can't. To me, you're always going to be Mr. Clean.
I know that's your given name, but I can't call you that.
You got to snuggle up this weekend with your wife and watch The Guardian. It'll be good. You'll enjoy it.
I will promise you that I will pretend to see whatever movie you tell me to watch.
That's fair. All right. What have you not shared with us that you just can't leave without sharing with our listeners and viewers?
Man, well, we've covered a lot of ground. I don't have anything else unless you guys got something for me. I guess if I had a parting word, it's find something that you love. It can be a person, it could be a passion for a profession, or it could be a hobby, and do it.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough, man. It's so awesome to meet you, and I appreciate your accepting the invitation to be on the podcast and sharing this information. There's no doubt people will get a ton out of it.
Well, I appreciate it, you guys, and I know it's called the Graybeard Chronicles, but I dye my hair white so people think I'm wise. I'm really only 37.
Oh, I'm just going to leave that alone, I think.
All right.
All right. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thank you, Dan, very much. Yeah,
you are certainly welcome, man.
Cheers.
It was an absolute pleasure. So let's close this out, Kevin. I'm gonna reach over. I just got the reminder from Kevin. I got to hit this button over here and say something like this. No matter who you are, where you are, or what you're doing, make sure between this podcast and the next, you take time to enjoy the ride.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Graybeard Chronicles. Please subscribe so you'll receive notification when new episodes are available. To learn more about the Graybeards, visit their website, graybeardchronicles.com.